So there's this movie that I had heard about for a while called Raw. It's this French horror movie about how a girl has these cannibalistic instincts that gets unleashed when she goes to veterinarian school. So she gets like some meat, and then at school cafeteria when her parents are there, and just freaks out. And so you know that like just like the mere thought or taste of meat freaks this girl out. She's strictly vegetarian, but then she gets hazed at the veterinarian school, where everybody dumps blood on her, and then they make her eat a rabbit kidney. Everybody's got to eat this rabbit kidney, and all of a sudden, it incites this insatiable craving for meat. So she's eating raw chickens. She's just going nuts, and she's in her. There's this really grotesque scene in the movie where her sister gets her finger cut off, and the sister's like passing out, all this blood's coming from it, and the dog's trying to go towards the finger, and they're shooing the dog away. And then she's looking at her sister's severed finger, and she just can't help herself. She just grabs the finger and starts going to town on it. You see like these extreme close-ups of the sinew being ripped off the finger and everything. And then she just vomits up hair, and there's all this. She goes through all these changes. She gets a rash when she first eats that rabbit kidney, but then once she finds out that she has this insatiable desire for meat, then that rash goes away, and then she just starts looking at humans a little bit differently. So it's sort of like this coming of age story, plus like starting to be like origin story of a cannibal in this as well too, taking place at this veterinarian school. So I thought it was a really cool twist. It will test how far you can get by watching something without having to throw up. So it'll test your gag reflexes. Also, it'll test like how much you can stomach things if you're eating while watching a movie. But this is a really cool, really unique movie.
Cannibal films is kind of an interesting subgenre all in itself, because it's really tough to make them humorous and light, because you have stuff like Green Inferno, Cannibal Holocaust. Like, I think Cannibal Holocaust is probably the first one that kind of like people freaked out about, and it kind of put it all on the like everyone's radar, the cannibal films. But yeah, cannibal movies are interesting. I don't know how you could have a humorous spin on cannibal movies, because the whole concept is kind of creepy, but there's not a lot of cannibal movies out there really.
Yeah, well, I just like the style, like a lot of these French horror movies. Like when we started talking about the French New Wave of horror movies, I just like how like relentless they are. It's just that they really go for it. That's like like a lot of the French horror stuff. But it's really cool, but it also makes them really unique too. It's like sort of like how the Italians have their own spin on horror movies. The French have a very distinct style for a lot of these like horror movies that really go for the throat. Yeah,
and it's gory, and that's like I from all the from the original, like we've talked about before, the original like French New Wave from like Martyrs and Inside and all those type of, like they don't shy away. It's kind of like, whereas it's like a typical like a North American version, or like other ones, it's sort of like there's a lot inferred. And it's kind of like that's where the tension comes. But when you're watching those ones, you know what they're teasing will be shown.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
It's typically over the top and realistic, right? Like you'll watch some like a lot of Asian stuff, like the Korean films that I was into for a long time. They're over the top, like you think of like Machine Girl or Tokyo Gore Police, and where they show tons of gore, but it's not really realistic. Like it's almost like right. Whereas French New Wave it's cringeworthy gore.
That's why when you watch like a lot of those French movies, like we talked about, like Inside or Frontiers or Martyrs, that's why they stay in your head for so long.
Yeah, Frontiers is great. Yeah, because you see that they'll put in scenes that kind of stick with you.
And, definitely.
Yeah, they
like the finger scene here. I'll remember that like probably forever.
Yeah,
the finger scene in this movie was so great.
Actually, another thing that I think about, because typically with the effects, and I haven't seen Raw, but I've seen a lot of French New Wave horror. They're practical effects, most of them.
Oh, definitely.
Because it just looks a lot better. And it takes me back to like, I remember when we were in film school, and part of the like trying to make horror films was trying to create that practical effect. Like I remember using pumps and like making fake blood, and like how can you and it brings back that kind of like, how did they do it thing. And there's an art to these horror films in the actual doing a practical effect and making it work, and then wondering how the shit did they do that? That's awesome. Like, and I think French New Wave does that. There's so many scenes where you're waiting for it, they show it, and it's practical, and you're like, that's a cool effect. And I think that gets lost a lot now. And I think, you don't see it as much in now. Well, especially in like in bigger budget films, it's all CG. Like the one that is going to be on my radar, it's all
Yeah.
it's all CG, and that's how they get around shit. But originally, there's this whole thing about like, hey, that's a cool thing for a filmmaker to do, is to figure out how to make this effect practically.
And they do these things. Then what else I like about it too is that they do this thing which Tarantino took from. So when he started incorporating European cinema, where they have these really long takes, and long takes with horror movies are great. Like there's a scene towards the beginning where this car crashes, and then you see, and then basically just lingers on it for a while. So these scenes where they draw out like the tension and the dread when you watch it. Also, like if there's this accident victim there, and then you see the cannibal going over towards the accident victim, it doesn't chop it up at all. It elongates it, it stretches it out, so there's more tension to it. And then when the gore happens, it's not a bunch of like quick cuts or anything.
Yeah.
It stays on it, and it doesn't do a bunch of quick cuts to distract you from it. So it keeps you in the moment a lot more, and I think it's more effective that way too.
I've always liked the tension stuff. Like staying on somebody and creating tension that way. It's like, it's the opposite of where things are going over here on bigger budget stuff, where it's quick cuts, lots of CG, and everything's kind of moving fast. It's like a big action movie. Those long lingering, it's like the rusty chainsaw being started up,
right,
and just being slowly walked towards, like that tension. It's so effective in horror, especially when you have stuff like that. So